Hey, Husker fans, welcome back to the Husker Big Red YouTube channel. I'm Chris Peterson, and joining me as always is Danny Gillette. And we're back here on this Thursday morning for another episode of the podcast. And we've got a lot to cover, a lot of things happening with Nebraska athletics on Wednesday. We've got John Cook stepping down, retiring, the legendary Nebraska volleyball coach. The Huskers already have a new coach hired, so we'll discuss that. We'll break down the latest with the transfer target Rocco Spindler. We've got some Senior Bowl updates. No spring game for Nebraska football. So we're going to talk about that, and also a chance for Nebraska basketball to get off the mat again tonight. So before we get into it, please make sure that you hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, get into the comment section. And Danny, how are you doing on this Thursday morning?
I'm feeling like Nebraska basketball, tired but ready to compete, ready to get into it. And there's a lot of news. And we couldn't have picked a better day to do a show.
It is a lot of news moving forward, and the first one, I guess, the kind of the bombshell news on Wednesday that I didn't think a lot of people really saw coming, but John Cook retires after a long tenure as Nebraska head coach, 25 seasons, won 722 matches, 4 national titles, 15 conference championships, numerous Final Fours. So that was surprising, but the way that it was handled, I thought, was incredibly just perfect. I mean, they get John Cook retired within basically an hour. Danny Bushboom Kelly has been hired from Louisville. She coached them to the national championship game in 2 out of the last 3 years. A Nebraska native, played for the Huskers. So, if you're going to replace a legend, if you can replace him with one of the best coaches in the country, I don't think that you can do it much better than Nebraska did this transition.
No, you're absolutely right. And it's kind of a rare thing in athletics to say that when a legendary coach retires, you find a pretty good replacement. I don't think there's going to be that growing pains or growing period. I anticipate that things will go off seamlessly under Danny Bushboom Kelly. And I wrote on one of my pages, the end of an era. And it's the end of the John Cook era, but I think the era of success and winning will stay the same under her leadership.
Yeah, I think it just was. I appreciated how they pulled that off with Bushboom Kelly, and yeah, it was coming at some point, right? I mean, John Cook was 68 years old, so it's not like he was going to be around forever. And maybe we should have seen this coming when Jordan Larson announced that she was going back to volleyball, or to playing more volleyball. Maybe that had something to do with it, but at any rate, this was a great transition. And one thing that we should say, the next kind of step in this process is like, how is it going to affect the roster and all that. Harper Murray hasn't made an official announcement, but she did post something on Instagram, and in the comments on that post, she said that she was going to be back for next season. So she said she's not going anywhere, so that would be a massive step forward for Bushboom Kelly, Bergen Riley, some of these other kids. But I really don't see them leaving Nebraska, because Nebraska volleyball, I mean, it is the premier program in the sport. I know they haven't won the national championship in a few years, but if there's a blue blood of college volleyball, Nebraska is it. Everybody wants to be Nebraska. Nobody has the fan support like Nebraska, so I really am not that concerned about player departures, especially because a couple of his assistants, John Cook's assistants, are going to remain on staff. So I think, yeah, it's going to be a fairly smooth transition. I think the recruits have also said that they're coming. So yeah, I mean, in terms of saying goodbye to a legend, Nebraska did have a similar experience with this, with Tom Osborne to Frank Solich, and frankly, I think this transition will probably go off even better than that one did.
And a 6-year contract for Bushboom Kelly, and a Nebraska native. She was a libero on the 2006 team, so she knows what the tradition of Nebraska volleyball is all about. And I think the program is in good hands. Like you mentioned, John Cook is 68 years old, so there is a point in time where you kind of realize that he wants to move on to greener pastures, and rightly so. So it's incredible what he's been able to accomplish over the course of his coaching career, and I'm excited to see this new era of Nebraska volleyball. And like I said, I anticipate a lot of success to be had.
Yeah, I anticipate a lot of success too. It's too bad that the Huskers weren't able to, win the national championship last season, with John Cook. But unfortunately, that's how it works. There's no guaranteed fairy tales in sports, as we all know. So, but John Cook, an amazing career. He can ride off into the sunset. And yeah, thanks for all that you've done for Nebraska volleyball, Coach Cook. You're an incredible leader, and I thought this past season was one of the best coaching jobs that he did, even though they didn't win the national championship. So, at any rate, Nebraska volleyball still in good hands moving forward. So to move on to something else that came out last night, that Troy Dannon was, doing the Husker radio, and kind of talking about, this whole volleyball transition. It did come up that there will not be a spring game this year for Nebraska football, which is a little bit different. Troy Dannon did say that they would have some type of celebration of athletes that could include volleyball and soccer and some of the other fall sports, but he did say that he didn't foresee anything being televised. Now that could change, but it is going to be, a shift for Nebraska football. A lot of programs, I think, are probably going to get away from spring games. But what do you think about this announcement from Troy Dannon that Nebraska football will not have a spring game this year?
I'm kind of torn because on one hand, it was a chance for the fans to see this team and, kind of scout out the players for next season. So, it was more of a fan thing, but that's exactly it. I feel like it was more of a fan thing. I feel like a lot of these spring games, I don't want to say players go through the motions, but it's basically like a glorified practice. And so from a program standpoint, I can kind of see the benefit of not having one. It's just a chance for unnecessary injuries and things like that. And, with all the movement in college football now, I could see, with roster sizes and things, it just, the spring game itself has kind of phased itself out, but I do feel bad for the fans and people who wanted to see this year's version of this team. But at the same time, the opportunity for the summer practice last year, that was a success. It was well attended last year, so that's an opportunity for fans in the summer to kind of see where this team is at. But I can understand both sides. I feel like the summer practice will be a chance where the fans can see the team a little bit more polished, so to speak. And so that'll be good. But I'm kind of disappointed that nothing is televised because I did like watching the spring games.
Yeah, it was fun when they had it. It was more of a real game, but I guess with roster limits and things like that, it probably will be becoming a thing of the past. And it is what it is. It is fun to watch, but I mean, at the end of the day, I think it's really not going to affect, how spring practice goes overall. So, just part of the new wave of college football, and not much, I guess, we can really say on it more than that. But yeah, we'll miss the chance to see some of the younger guys, but they did have some injuries, in last year's spring game with Bly Hill and Demetrius Bell, so that's probably factored into it as well. But yeah, it was a great chance to showcase the Nebraska fans again. So, that'll be disappointing, but I'm sure they'll find some way to, make it interesting. Speaking of spring ball, though, one thing that kind of is interesting with Rocco Spindler, if you've been following this recruitment, is that spring ball could have a big role in it. It's kind of been going around on social media. He's been put into the student directory, and I think that's something Nebraska did to try to, get him into spring practice. I would think that he needs to commit very sooner rather than later, because Tuesday was the deadline. That's when he visited. Still hasn't committed yet. There is a big difference though, because he can't go through spring ball at Michigan. He would have to skip spring ball just due to their academic calendar. So that's one advantage that Nebraska has. I think both teams are willing to pay the NIL money needed for it. So really, to me, it feels like it's Nebraska or Michigan. But if Rocco makes a visit to Michigan this weekend, I would feel much more pessimistic. Like, I think this commitment needs to happen for Nebraska very soon, or it's probably not going to happen at all.
For what it's worth, I was put into my student directory for, a college that I had been accepted to but never went to. So there is that. But I do think it's still a positive sign. He was projected to have a crystal ball from E.J. Holland, who was a Michigan on 3 writers. So that's certainly a positive there. But I agree, if he takes a visit to Michigan this weekend, things may look a little bit more bleak for Nebraska. Nevertheless, I like where Nebraska sits here, and I would love to have Spindler on the team.
Yeah, he would be a huge addition. Spindler has had his transfer portal ranking updated. He's 63rd overall in the 24/7 Sports rankings, and he's 6th among interior offensive linemen. So it would be another top 100 offensive lineman. I think that would be maybe like the 5th top 100 transfer portal recruit overall. I think the 6th blue chip, they would add in the transfer portal. And, this would be a big pickup. I know some fans have tried to say, oh, like, look at his PFF grades weren't that great or whatever. Like, I don't care about I don't think that those
PFF
guys,
grades aren't that
frankly,
great.
yeah, they're not. They don't know blocking. They don't know the blocking assignments. I mean, especially with offensive linemen, it's just, I don't trust their grading system that much. So, I mean, I'm not saying that you should totally dismiss it, but like, let's let the coaches evaluate these guys instead of, some dude behind a computer who has no idea what he's talking about, which is frankly, PFF. I mean, they don't know what they're grading. I mean, how can you grade an offensive lineman when you don't know his assignments? I mean, that's just like, if you've played offensive line, that's what your assignment is, whether you're like combo blocking or, all that stuff really matters, and that's not factored in. So anyway, forgetting that rant, Rocco Spindler, I mean, last year he replaced the guy who got hurt, Billy, I think Slurth was his name. I don't remember exactly how you say his name, but anyways, once the guy got healthy, Rocco Spindler was so good he didn't get his job back, and they made him move to another position. So that tells you how good Rocco Spindler is once he got that opportunity. He started 13 games. He's played a ton of snaps. And you look at the guard position right now, he'd be a major upgrade. And then, Justin Evan Jenkins could move over and play center. And I think it would just really solidify, your starting 5. And sure, maybe you could add another tackle in the spring, but I feel like if you have Katula, Evan Jenkins, Luftowski, Spindler, and Pritchett, you've got a pretty solid starting 5.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. And I feel like the addition of Spindler would probably be one of the last ones out of this, transfer portal class. A very successful, very solid transfer portal class. A lot of needs are taken care of. I know running backs, but I feel like the staff is going to just see what they have on the roster. And I do think there is talent there. So, I feel like, people make a big deal, and this is, I'm going to go on a rant here too. And you can stop me, feel free whenever, but I feel like people make a big deal like, oh, this guy only had 2 carries this year, and blah, blah, blah. You can either run through the hole or you can't. You either have the explosiveness or you don't. It's very clear to see. And I get experience, like, in terms of carries, like, okay, 2 carries doesn't necessarily mean that he has a lot of experience. True. But I think in terms of a running back, vision and raw talent over the amount of carries is more important than however many carries a running back actually has when talking about production.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think, there is a bit of, like you said, there is a lack of production with Nebraska and behind Emmett Johnson and all that type of stuff.
Right,
But yeah, just because a guy hasn't played doesn't mean that he can't play. And sometimes, it's like that whole thing, like, oh, you don't have relevant job experience. Well, how do you get relevant job experience? You actually get to do the job. And, Nelson and Quentin Ives haven't really gotten that chance. I wish that they would have given Quentin Ives more chances in the Pinstripe Bowl. He had that touchdown, and it was like, well, why didn't you not give him more carries? But I mean, so yeah, I do think, Pete Nako's reported that Nebraska is going to target a complimentary running back. That's what he said. But it's like, for one thing, okay, who are you going to target? I mean, you're just assuming that there's going to be somebody that's going to fit. I mean, to me, it would be nice to maybe get like, a Gabert, like a big back type, a short yardage type, but there's nothing to say that Quentin Ives can't do that. I don't know exactly how big he is, but I just feel like, yeah, I definitely agree that there's a chance for Nebraska to evaluate these guys and see what they have on the roster. And, if they look at that and they're like, hey, I think this guy's going to be more productive than the portal, like, I don't think people need to freak out about that if they don't add a running back. I think it's reasonable if they do, but it's also, I think, reasonable if they don't, because they've also got Booth and Parker, who gives you 4 young guys. And running back is a position where, young players have been able to produce. That's college, the NFL, whatever. Like you said, either you can do it or you can't. I mean, it's really like, some guys just have it. And whether it's recruiting ranking or not, like, some guys, like, when they have the football and people are chasing them, they can get away. And like, it's a natural thing. So, yeah, if Nebraska doesn't go after running back this spring, I think it's because they feel confident in who they have, and I think that there is some of that right now, and that's obvious why they didn't like pursue a running back in this winter transfer window.
And in today's day and age, I almost want to play a freshman running back because if they don't get a chance to play, they might be gone. They might be
Yeah,
gone. So, especially a guy like Jameer Parker, I know teams are kind of, looking at his skill set and thinking, wow, this kid is really good. And Connor Booth is a Gatorade National Player of the Year. So, I mean, these two are talented. And, I think this year we'll get a chance to see him. I know we talked about it a little bit on the last show, but I would rather almost start freshman running backs and see what they can do than to go out and get a transfer portal running back just so we could continue to actually have the development process at the position on the roster instead of filling in, the position via the transfer portal.
and now that I'm more thinking about it, if Nebraska was to get like a transfer portal running back, what it might be for is a guy like a Ramir Johnson and for pass protection,
Mm-hmm.
because that's one thing that younger running backs do sometimes struggle with is blitz pickups and pass protection. So I honestly don't. That doesn't mean these guys can't do it, but maybe there might be an issue there. But yeah, maybe somebody like that who could help in the passing game. Although Emmett Johnson proved to be very effective there too, but it's also like Emmett Johnson can't play all the snaps. I mean, he will break down during the Big Ten season if they try to do that. So they have to have a plan to use him smartly and to make sure that he can be effective. But Emmett Johnson definitely needs to get 15 to 20 touches. And I remember when he was a sophomore, maybe was that his freshman year? I can't remember. But the 2023 season, we were being like, why isn't Emmett Johnson getting more carries? Because he was doing well with 15, 12 carries. So if he got 15 to 20 touches consistently, I think he would be a very productive running back.
We also just wanted to see some sort of life on offense. I remember that season, and
yeah,
I was like, "Please, we can't throw an interception if we hand the ball off to Emmett Johnson. So let's do something here." But I saw a graphic the other day that said that we had the number 2 transfer portal wide receiver class in the country. So that's exciting too. And I think with this offense, you're going to see a lot of running the football, but I don't think it's going to be as run, dependent. And I know we said that last year. I remember sitting here at 7:35 in the morning my time saying this exact same thing. But I think, Dan Holgerson has a better idea of what he wants to scheme. He wants to air the ball out a little bit more. And I think having a competent offensive coordinator is going to be, crucial in making sure this thing runs correctly.
Yeah, for sure. It's going to be a lot. I think he's just going to run a lot smoother with Dana Holgerson, and from day one, I think, and it's getting this whole offseason to work with Raiola and to work with these receivers, and getting a better offensive line too. That's going to be a huge factor. And I know Nebraska fans have been all over that. That's like one thing with this fan base is they do understand what it means to be good in the trenches. So,
and you do too as a former offensive lineman.
Yeah, I mean, just look at the teams that win. I mean, the teams that win. Like, if you want to make the playoff in college football, you better have a damn good offensive line. And Nebraska's just wasn't good enough last year. Rocco Spindler would help. And I think, he would make it so some other guys, like a Grant Bricks. And Grant Bricks could still play his way into the starting lineup. Yeah. It's not like he can't. But it could maybe allow him to focus on tackle a little bit more. I've said this a million times, but Matt Rule said he was a tackle. So he was on the depth chart at guard last year. So who knows where he's going to end up. But at any rate, so another thing happening this week, obviously Senior Bowl. We got the Shrine Bowl with, Nair is at the Shrine Bowl, Nash Hutmaker's at the Shrine Bowl, then Ty Robinson, Tommy Hill, and Thomas Fedoni are at the Senior Bowl. And I do have to say, I think it's pretty cool that Matt Rule, made, kind of trips down there to support all of his guys. And man, this dude seriously never sleeps because he has been on the recruiting trail like crazy.
Yeah, I don't know. He must take cat naps, like 20-minute cat naps, and yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they, every day you see him posting a picture somewhere, and I get he's like going to these games and stuff, but he's also, making trips to see recruits. He's been at Buford a bunch, and so it's been impressive to see all the work that he's done. And Nebraska is kind of having a big recruiting weekend, set up this weekend, and I like where things are trending in the 2026 class. So, I mean, they still have a lot of work to do, but a a lot of nice work on the recruiting trail, and it is helpful to have some of these guys, I think, performing well and hopefully getting drafted. Thomas Fidoni's been making some plays. Nair. So what do you think about? Do you think all 5 of these guys are going to get picked?
I don't know. I could see Tommy Hill getting picked because he already had, he was already highly regarded before his injury. So if that can get sorted out, I know plantar fasciitis isn't something that heals overnight, but if he can just stay healthy, I think so. I think Nash could get picked. I know he's been impressing. Tony Pauline called him out the other day. I think Ty could get picked. Thomas Fidoni, I'm not so sure because of his explosiveness, and that's just due to injuries. I thought the injury slowed him down, but he made a nice catch the other day. It was a catch over Hunter Wohler, formerly of Wisconsin. So you never know. You never know. I feel like some of these guys who get drafted, and we could really see, kind of this first class of the Matt Rule era have success in the NFL because teams need defensive tackles. Teams, especially now, need good tight ends. And so I'm excited to kind of see where these guys end up. And I especially hope the best for Hill because I feel like before he was injured, he was the best prospect out of this group. And now, that kind of slowed him down a bit, but he was even projected as a first-round pick at one point. So I'm curious to see how he can kind of bounce back because I felt so bad for him last year. Obviously, I don't want injuries for anybody, but Hill's stock was so high after the Colorado game and the interception return for the touchdown, and things were looking really great. And then just to have the plantar fasciitis nagging him, kind of ruined the rest of his season. So I'm excited either way, though. It's good to see a lot of these guys, get at least recognition on a national level. And it's something that Nebraska hasn't had for a couple of years now.
Yeah, and I think I do think that Ty Robinson is going to be the first one picked. I think he's going to be a day 2 pick. That's my prediction for Ty Robinson.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think Tommy's going to go on day 3. I think Nash is going to go on day 3. I don't know about Thomas Fidoni. Maybe round 7. Like, teams need tight ends in the NFL. Blocking, special teams. Maybe they'll. I think it's really going to depend how he runs. If he runs well at the combine and if he's looking healthier in terms of that knee, then I do think there's a chance he could get drafted in like the 7th round, the 6th, 7th round. But I mean, he looked good at the Senior Bowl, but it also, those are one-on-one situations, which can be a little bit different. So we'll see what happens. But having a good week at the Senior Bowl and having a good week at the combine is definitely going to put him in a position to get drafted, and that's all he can really do. So
it worked for Trey Palmer and Cam Jurgens. So Cam Jurgens' stock actually rose a lot over the course of the Shrine Bowl and the Senior Bowl and then the combine. So it can happen. And while we're on the subject of bowl games, this just popped into my head. Shout out to Dayton Raiola for being invited to the 2026 Polynesian Bowl. I thought that was pretty exciting. We're getting a lot of representatives in these games now, so it'll be exciting to watch him after a pretty solid season last year for Buford.
It's been fun to see, Nebraska kind of made that investment in him and that commitment in him, and it's paid off because he's maturing physically. I'm sure he's mentally maturing, but every time I see a picture of this dude, he's bigger, he's taller. He looks more like his brother, and he definitely is looking like a division. Like when they first offered him, he still kind of had the baby fat look going on. And now, every time I see him, he looks taller than Matt, like more tall than Matt Rule. So I'm excited for him. Yeah, that was an exciting thing, I think, and I really like that Nebraska's got him in the fold in the 2026 class. So he's going to be visiting this weekend along with some other guys, and I think that's a big positive and playing for one of the best programs in the country. So he's facing high-level competition, and, with him and Latif, I feel pretty good about that quarterback position moving forward.
And I feel like it's been a really good thing to see Nebraska representatives in the All-American Bowl, the Polynesian Bowl, even something, even though it's a little bit different, the Shrine Bowl, just seeing the Nebraska name get out there more nationally, thanks in large part to Matt Rule and his coaching staff is really good to see.
All right. So now, reluctantly, let's talk some Nebraska basketball to close out the show.
Can we not?
I mean, yeah, it's been tough. The last game was really tough. And so this is to me like tonight's game for this team against Illinois. Like this is the last stand. Like this is Custer's last stand for Nebraska basketball, so to speak, because they still like if you look at the ESPN projections, and they're not the end all be all, but Joey brackets is usually pretty accurate. Nebraska's still among the last 8 teams out, so they're still within striking distance. Believe it or not, even though they're 2-7, as they do have some quality wins, Illinois is ranked high enough that I believe this would be a quad 1 win. I'd have to double check the NET rankings, but they're ranked 18th in the AP poll. And so they're ranked 10th in the NET rankings. So it would be a quad 1 victory. And if they get this win, which obviously is like feels improbable, but if they could find a way, it could still turn around the season. And I know that seems crazy to say that like there's still a chance to save this thing, but that's just the reality of college basketball in Nebraska being in the Big Ten. Like the schedule is so difficult. If they could get on a run and get somewhere close to 500, they might still be able to sneak in, but they have to win today. If they don't win today, I think they're done. I think the season, in terms of making the NCAA tournament, is over.
I love your optimism, Chris. I mean, that's why you're on the show, so you can provide the optimism, and I can just be the big rain cloud on your parade here. But to borrow a phrase that the kids say, this team is cooked. I would not be shocked at all if they lost to Illinois. And you heard Fred Hoiberg's, I'm sure, press conference the other day saying, he tried to rally the team and tell them that they haven't fallen, that the sky hasn't fallen, and they're not done yet. But nothing over the course of this losing streak has led me to believe that they can pull off tonight's win against Illinois. Now, I'll be happy, Crow. I'll be happy to be wrong, but for me, and you mentioned this a lot too, is just their defensive rotations and how late they are, and they've really struggled. I against the 3-point shot. I saw a graphic and. They're giving up so many 3-point attempts per game that any competent team that sinks any of these shots, it is a loss for Nebraska. And I just don't feel hopeful about tonight's game. I hope I'm wrong, but it feels like this team, and you mentioned this too on the last show, is running out of gas. You look at guys like Gary and Williams, and they really look tired. Like they look tired, and that's not where you want to be at this point in the season. And yeah, it's hard for me to get excited about Nebraska basketball. I'm looking forward to baseball, which is happening in a couple weeks. But yeah, I really do hope they win, but it's going to be a challenge. It really is.
Yeah, I mean, Illinois is a 4-point favorite. I mean, at Nebraska's building, so that isn't great. I mean, that tells you something right there. And then they've got, I don't know how to pronounce Kasparis Jackinus. That's not how you pronounce his name, probably, but he's a foreign player, but he's been dynamic, averaging almost 16 points a game. And that's the thing, these guys, they shoot a lot of threes. They shoot a pretty good percentage. In conference play, they have attempted more 3-pointers than anybody. They're only making 29% though. So I mean, they're actually even though they're first in the Big Ten in attempts, they're actually 17th in percentage, but they're fourth in 3-point field goals per game, which is a part of that has to do just with volume. So it's really interesting in that they're going to get a lot of shots, and that's the thing with Nebraska is they give up more catch and shoot 3-pointers than probably any team in the country, it seems like, and they did that last year. Sometimes that is part of your like philosophy, like that partially like Penn State does that, but Penn State also forces more turnovers than anybody but Purdue. So it's like I understand you giving up some catch and shoot threes and some open looks, like if you're successful with your pressure and you're forcing turnovers, but Nebraska's not doing that. They're not like they're not pressing people. They're just playing defense and doing it so badly that guys are just wide open. So I don't know. Yeah, again, I don't know if they're going to fix that, but it was like, I mean, at the start of the season, that's what's so baffling to me is that, it seemed like defense was the identity of this team. I mean, going back to that UCLA game and some of those games, like defense was
the tournament over the holidays. I thought they played well too on defensively. So.
Yeah, and it's just falling apart. So you look at, I mean, they forced 10.8 turnovers per game, which isn't horrible. I mean, it's middle of the pack, but they're they're 16th in the Big Ten in blocks. So, all that talk about how they got this rim protection and all that. No. They're 12th in the Big Ten in steals. Like, it's just, they don't do anything well defensively.
You're right.
I mean, the 2-point percentage defense, again, in Big Ten, this is just in Big Ten games. I'm not counting all their crap opponents from the non-conference. Their 2-point defense, 55% field goal percentage. That's 14th in the Big Ten. Like, their overall field goal percentage defense is 13th. Their 3-point percentage defense is 18th. They give up 38%. I mean, it's just terrible. They are, the only thing that they're doing successfully is keeping teams off the free throw line, but they're getting wide open 3-pointers. So why do you need a wide open three?
They don't need to go there.
It's like, I'll just take this wide open 3. I don't need to attack the basket.
It's so weird too, because coming into the season, we talked about the depth that this team had. Yeah. Now the depth seems razor thin, and it's kind of alarming.
It is. I mean, Braxton May didn't even play, and now neither point guard is starting. It's just like, what lineup is Fred Hoiberg going to even use tonight? That's my first thought, is like, he's changed it up so much. I thought starting Sam Hoiberg was just weird. I mean, I understand.
Like, I get it being weird. You got to do something.
Yeah, I get it. I get Andrew Morgan, but like, I just felt like that Sam was that guy who comes off the bench. I don't know. I mean, I get it.
Start Sam Hoiberg, you might be in trouble.
I mean, I know that's the one thing, is he is a more aggressive defender, I'll say, I feel like that probably had something to do with it, but I don't know. We'll see. It's like Fred Hoiberg said, nobody's going to feel sorry for this team. Nobody in the Big Ten is going to feel they'll beat your asses until you're 2-18. So you guys need to wake up, because like, that's where I think Fred is relatively safe. But if this team goes like 3-17 or 4-16 or something, then I think you at least have to consider it. I mean, you at least have to look at it at that point.
And I don't get, like, I do not understand how this team could go down this road. Like, I understand lack of cohesiveness because of, this being a transported team, but this isn't like, a 2019 team where they were building and they were just trying to get their feet under them. This is a team with experience, and yet they are struggling so badly. It's like, I used the analogy the other day. It's like when the Monstars stole Sean Bradley and Michael Jordan's powers, and now they can't play, and now they forgot how to play basketball. It's like that. I mean, I really don't get like how this could happen. I get, like, obviously poor rotations and things like that, but on paper it just doesn't make a ton of sense.
I think like, part of it is just the Big Ten is so freaking hard. Like, Minnesota is the worst team in the Big Ten, and they're ranked 94th in the Ken Pom rankings. So I mean, it's just, the thing about it is there's just very little margin for error, and so if you have a bad night against any team in the Minnesota's the worst team in the Big Ten, and they beat Michigan, who was undefeated at the time. And that right there shows you, like, even the worst, even Minnesota, which looks like absolute hot garbage, they still have Dawson Garcia. They've got guys who can play. So I feel like this league is so competitive that there just are no gimmies. And if you're not ready, like, Penn State, who's like competing with us for for like that 15th spot, like, they might have, if it wasn't for Braden Smith at Purdue, they might have the best point guard in the country right now, in Ace Baldwin, and they can barely, like, they're
Ace Baldwin is good, yeah.
Yep. Yeah, and they're almost in, he's better than anyone in Nebraska has, and they're still almost in the same boat. So I feel like some of it does have to do with just, they've made this Big Ten conference so difficult that, if you get, look at UCLA, like, if you get in a slump, like, even if you're a good team, like, you can take some lumps. And I hope these guys can get off the mat, because there's a good enough players on this team to beat people, especially at home. Like, so I don't know. I feel like they need to find a way to win one road game at some point this season, and win some home games. And as long as they do that, I think Fred's going to be fine if they get up to like 6-7 wins. But if they're like 3-17 and they miss the Big Ten tournament, I don't know. I don't think he's going to get fired, but I think Troy Dannon has to, like, at least consider it.
Winning on the road has been a challenge, even last year too. Like, last year it seemed like they had road issues too. So, I don't know. I mean, I really thought this team was better than they were, and I thought, again, after the Diamond Head Classic, that this team had turned the corner. And even, like you said, after the win against UCLA, I thought this team had turned the corner. But I just don't know where this team and this program is headed, because, like you said, if Fred loses out, then you might have a tough decision to make. And I understand people thinking that we're crazy and whatever, and don't fire coaches, blah blah blah. But the body of work outside of the last, let's see, say 2 seasons hasn't been there. And even last season was a trip to the NCAA tournament that resulted in a loss. And, had we not had Casey Tominaga last season, it would have been a whole lot different. And now without Casey, you're seeing kind of the effects of that, as well as the kind of transfer portal put together roster. So I don't know. I mean, I'm not like fire Fred Hoiberg right now, but I'm just seeing a lot of the same trends that we saw last year. I mean, 3 years ago, and less of what we saw last year.
Yeah, I mean, just at the end of the day, what killed this team was, those 2 home games they lost to Rutgers and USC. You just in this league, you can't lose home games like that. I mean, they were, I think, a 9-point favorite against Rutgers and, like a 5 or 6 point favorite against USC. Like maybe you can lose one of those games over the course of the season, but it's just this league is so tough. I mean, it's hard for anybody to win them. I think Michigan has 1 road win in the Big Ten. Like it is tough, because like I said, literally every road game outside of Minnesota in this conference is a quad 1 game. Like that's just where it is, because every team,
even Minnesota stuff, like you said. So
yeah, and they're not that. They're like they're 93rd, so they're not that. And that's the Ken Palm. I'm not even. They could be higher in the NET rankings. So, like that's the thing is like every road game you play is a quad 1. Then when you get those chances at home, like you have to take advantage. If Nebraska had beaten Rutgers and USC, they'd be 4-5 in the Big Ten right now, and they would be projected to make the NCAA tournament. So, like for all the things that they have not done, like those were the 2 games that they really needed to win, and they just didn't do it. And so, looking back on it, those are the ones that frustrate me the most. And it was, just bad, and that was bad defense. Like the thing with Rutgers is it was just bad individual defense, because that's what Rutgers does. They have NBA level players, and they're just going to sit there and play 1-on-1 against you, and Nebraska couldn't handle it. And so I feel like that game, the Iowa game and that Rutgers game, I feel like were the turning points of the season.
Iowa game really frustrates me looking back on it now, because I feel like that's when things started to fall apart a little bit.
Yeah, they haven't won since then, and if they win that game, they probably find a way in some of those other games. But yeah, it feels like now the chemistry is gone. I don't know. I'm not saying that the guys are like fighting each other, but just it doesn't seem like they're
on the court. Yeah.
They don't seem like they're having fun playing basketball right now. Like Bryce Williams, and like they don't look like they want to be out there. And I'm not saying that they're not trying hard or whatever, but like last year, they looked like they were having fun. I mean, even though like there's high pressure moments and stuff, but they still like they over these last few games, it seems like when I watch their body language, it looks like somebody who's like clocking in for their day at Walmart. Like they're going there, they're trying to put in their best effort, but their heart's not in it right now. And I don't know if that's just like a defeated mentality or whatever, but they need to get over it. And the only way out is through. So they're either going to make it or they're not.
Yeah, and you look at guys like Bryce Williams and Juwan Gary. I mean, they do look tired, because if you really think about it, they've been not carrying this team for the last 2 seasons, but putting the team, kind of on their back in those key moments. And then when you talk about maybe Gary taking on a bigger role offensively this season, and Williams kind of leading the charge in that way, it does add up. It's just. They look like a scared and defeated team right now, and that's not to say that they're not trying or that they're weak or whatever, but you can tell that this is starting to all add up for them. It's like watching the football team 2 or 3 years ago. You could tell that they're just kind of defeated. They know what's coming, and unfortunately, it's a bad product on the court.
Yep, it is. Hopefully. They will turn it around tonight. The women's team also plays at Purdue, so they kind of have a chance to bounce back after losing to Ohio State tonight. And the women are in a good spot to make the NCAA tournament.
But really good.
Yeah, so there's still that, and hopefully we will get some positive news from Rocco Spindler soon. I feel very confident that he's going to be a Nebraska commitment still at this
probably
point.
About 10 minutes after we post this.
Probably
Look at the
probably,
news.
Yeah, get the old Hayes Fawcett update, with the graphic release. But anyway, that's how it works. So. At any rate, guys, thanks for coming along on this show. Please hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, go into the comments section, and as always, go Big Red.
Go Big Red.